The harsh overhead lights of San Francisco International Airport's Gate 42 cast unflattering shadows across Zoe Parker's exhausted face as she clutched her 9-month-old daughter Emma closer to her chest. The baby's persistent fussing had turned into full-blown wails, drawing disapproving glances from business travelers hunched over laptops and tourists, scrolling mindlessly through their phones. Zoe's cheeks burned with embarrassment as she desperately bounced Emma in her arms, whispering soothing words that seemed to evaporate in the sterile airport air. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Shh, baby girl, it's okay, Zoe murmured, gently stroking Emma's soft curls. We're going to get on this plane, and everything will be better, I promise. The words felt hollow even as she spoke them, her own confidence wavering as the minutes ticked closer to boarding time. 26 years old, with a community college degree and dwindling savings, Zoe had spent the last of her money on this economy ticket to Denver. After losing her job as a veterinary assistant when the clinic downsized, and with rent increasing on her tiny Oakland apartment, the walls of possibility had closed in around her. Her last hope was her former roommate from college, Jessica, who had offered her couch and promised connections at the animal hospital where she worked. It wasn't much, but it was a chance. Something Zoe had learned to grab onto with both hands. Her weathered backpack, stuffed with what remained of their possessions, weighed heavily on her shoulders. Inside were 3 changes of clothes for each of them, Emma's favorite stuffed elephant missing one eye, a folder containing Zoe's resume and certificates, and $178 in cash, the sum total of their worldly wealth. The bank account linked to her debit card held exactly $24.37, a number Zoe had checked compulsively throughout the morning. Final boarding call for Economy Group 5, Flight 1826 to Denver, the gate agent announced through the crackling speaker system. Zoe exhaled with relief. Finally! She gathered her backpack and diaper bag, adjusting Emma on her hip as she joined the short line of stragglers making their way toward the gate. The gate agent, a middle-aged woman with meticulously applied makeup and a name tag reading Patricia, gave Zoe a tight smile as she approached. Boarding pass, please. Zoe shifted Emma to her other hip, the baby's cries momentarily subsiding as she became distracted by the new face before her. With her free hand, Zoe fumbled in her jacket pocket for the crumpled boarding pass she'd printed at the library the day before. Patricia scanned the document, her expression shifting from professional neutrality to something Zoe couldn't quite read. Miss Parker, I see you have an infant traveling with you. Do you have her boarding document? A cold wave of panic washed over Zoe. I thought children under 2 fly free. That's what the website said when I booked. She'll be sitting on my lap. The gate agent's eyes narrowed slightly. Yes, children under 2 can fly as lap infants, but you still need to have added her to your reservation and obtained a boarding document. It's for safety regulations and passenger count. Zoe's heart raced. I didn't know. I've never flown with her before. Can you add her now, please? We really need to make this flight. Patricia's fingers clicked rapidly over her keyboard. Her lips pursed in concentration, or perhaps judgment. After what felt like an eternity, she looked up. I can add her, but there's a fee for processing lap infant tickets at the gate. It's $75. The amount hit Zoe like a physical blow. $75 she didn't have, at least not if she wanted to eat for the next few days or take the bus from the Denver airport to Jessica's apartment. Is there any way you could waive the fee? Please, Zoe's voice cracked, betraying her desperation. I didn't know, and I really can't afford. I'm sorry, but this is company policy. Patricia cut her off, her voice lowering as the line behind Zoe grew. You either need to pay the fee, or you won't be able to board with your child. Emma, sensing her mother's distress, began to cry again, her tiny face reddening with the effort. The sound only seemed to harden Patricia's resolve. "Ms. Parker, you're holding up other passengers. If you can't pay the fee, I'll need to ask you to step aside." The humiliation burned hotter than any fever Zoe had ever experienced. She could feel the stares of the passengers behind her, could almost hear their thoughts. Poor planning, irresponsible mother, another millennial who doesn't read the fine print. "I can pay," she finally said, the words tasting bitter. "I'll use my debit card." The mental calculation was swift and brutal. 24, 37 minus 75 would leave her with nothing. Less than nothing. The overdraft fee would be another $35 she couldn't afford. But what choice did she have? As Zoe reached for her wallet, Emma's cries escalated to screams, her little body arching in distress. The diaper bag slipped from Zoe's shoulder, spilling its contents across the carpeted floor of the gate area. Diapers, wipes, a half-empty bottle, pacifiers rolling in different directions. "Oh my God!" Zoe whispered, tears welling in her eyes as she knelt to gather the scattered items, still clutching Emma to her chest. Patricia sighed audibly. "Ms. Parker, you're creating a disruption. I'm going to have to ask you to step aside and deal with your child before continuing the boarding process." A businessman in line behind her made a show of checking his watch. "Some of us have connections to make," he muttered, just loud enough for Zoe to hear. Red-faced and fighting back tears, Zoe stepped out of line, trying to gather her belongings, while soothing her screaming daughter. It was a losing battle on both fronts. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Mom," Patricia called over, her voice carrying across the gate area. "Your child is clearly in distress, and you seem unable to calm her. I'm concerned about how she'll handle a 2-hour flight in this state." Zoe froze, recognizing the shift in tone. This was no longer about the $75 fee. "I promise she'll calm." "Down once we're on the plane," Zoe pleaded, bouncing Emma with increasing desperation. "She's just tired and hungry. I'll feed her as soon as we're seated." Patricia exchanged glances with another gate agent who had appeared beside her. They spoke in hushed tones, nodding in Zoe's direction. "Ms. Parker," Patricia approached her, hands clasped in front of her uniform. "I'm afraid we cannot allow you to board this flight. Your child is in clear distress, and our concern is for the comfort of all passengers. Additionally, you've demonstrated an inability to manage the boarding process efficiently." The words didn't make sense at first. Zoe blinked, trying to process what she was hearing. You're not letting us on the plane?" she finally managed. "We can rebook you on tomorrow morning's flight at no additional charge, which will give you time to properly prepare for traveling with an infant," Patricia offered, her tone suggesting this was a generous concession. Tomorrow morning, where would they sleep tonight? What would they eat? The $75 fee was insurmountable. A hotel room was impossible. "I don't have anywhere to go," Zoe admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "We were supposed to stay with my friend in Denver tonight. I can't afford a hotel." Patricia's expression didn't change. "I'm sorry, but that's not the airline's responsibility. There are shelters in the city if you're truly without options." A shelter with Emma. The thought made Zoe physically ill. "The next passengers may now board," the other gate agent announced, effectively dismissing Zoe's existence. In a daze, Zoe moved to a row of seats against the wall, collapsing onto the hard plastic. Emma's cries had quieted to whimpers, exhaustion finally overtaking her. The irony wasn't lost on Zoe, now that they weren't allowed on the flight. Emma had calmed down. The final passengers filed onto the plane, some averting their eyes as they passed, others staring openly at the spectacle she had become. Zoe felt less than human, a cautionary tale for other travelers. Don't be like her. As the gate agents prepared to close the door, a tall figure approached the counter. From her seat, Zoe could see only his back, broad shoulders under a well-cut charcoal suit, dark hair touched with silver at the temples. His posture radiated authority, and even Patricia's demeanor changed as he spoke to her, his voice too low for Zoe to hear. The man gestured in Zoe's direction, and Patricia's eyes flicked toward her momentarily before returning to him, her head nodding rapidly. Money changed hands, more money than Zoe had seen in weeks, and Patricia's smile became genuine for the first time. To Zoe's astonishment, the man then walked directly toward her, his expression unreadable. Up close, she could see he was older than she had initially thought, perhaps in his late 40s, with sharp green eyes that assessed her situation in seconds. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't place. "I couldn't help but notice your predicament." Zoe tensed, instinctively holding Emma closer. In her experience, strangers offering help usually wanted something in return. "I'm fine," she said automatically, the lie transparent. The corners of his mouth turned up slightly, clearly. "Nevertheless, I've spoken with the gate agent, and she's agreed to let you board the flight after all." Zoe blinked, certain she had misheard. "What?" "I've paid the infant fee and arranged for you to board. They're holding the door." "Why would you do that?" Suspicion colored her voice. "You don't know me." The man shrugged, as if paying for strangers' flights was something he did every Tuesday. "Let's just say I've been in difficult situations myself. The gate agent mentioned Denver. I'm heading there as well. Now, shall we board before they change their minds?" Zoe hesitated, torn between desperation and deep-rooted caution. But what choice did she have? Sleep in the airport? Find a shelter for the night? Risk missing the opportunity Jessica had offered? "Thank you," she finally managed, gathering her belongings. "I'll pay you back somehow." The man waved his hand dismissively. "No need. Consider it a stroke of luck for both of us." As they approached the gate, Patricia's entire demeanor had transformed. "Ms. Parker, we're so pleased you'll be joining us after all," she said, her voice honeyed with false warmth. "And Mr. Harrington has generously upgraded both of you to first class. Wasn't that kind?" "First class?" Zoe shot a questioning look at the stranger. Mr. Harrington, apparently, who simply nodded at Patricia. "Very kind," Zoe echoed, still feeling as though she had stepped into someone else's life. As they walked down the jetway, Emma now calm and curious in her arms, Zoe found her voice. "I'm Zoe Parker, and this is Emma." "Daniel Harrington," the man replied simply. "Pleased to meet you both." Stepping onto the plane, Zoe was immediately directed left instead of right, into the first-class cabin she had never seen except in movies. The seats were enormous, the lighting soft, the air somehow fresher than in the terminal. Flight attendants with perfect smiles greeted them, none of the judgment or disdain she had come to expect. "Your seats are 2A and 2B, a flight attendant informed them, gesturing to a pair of spacious seats by the window. "Can I get you anything before takeoff? Perhaps a blanket for the little one?" Zoe nodded mutely, still processing the rapid turn of events. Just 15 minutes ago, she'd been on the verge of spending the night in an airport or shelter. Now she was being offered blankets in first class. As she settled into the wide leather seat, Daniel Harrington took the aisle seat, beside her, opening his laptop without further conversation. Zoe arranged Emma on her lap, the baby's eyes wide with wonder at the new surroundings. "Thank you again," Zoe said quietly. "I don't know why you did this, but it means more than you can imagine." Daniel looked up from his screen, studying her face for a moment. "Sometimes people deserve a break, Ms. Parker. Life can be unforgiving." There was something in his eyes, a shadow of understanding, perhaps, that suggested he knew exactly how unforgiving life could be. Before she could respond, a flight attendant arrived with a warm blanket for Emma and a glass of champagne for each adult. "Oh, I don't," Zoe began to protest, but Daniel interrupted gently. "It's included. Enjoy it." Hesitantly, Zoe accepted. The flute, the bubbles dancing in the cabin's soft lighting. When was the last time she had tasted champagne? Her college graduation, perhaps, when the future had seemed full of promise instead of pitfalls. As the plane began to push back from the gate, Emma drifted to sleep in Zoe's arms, the day's excitement and stress finally taking their toll. Zoe allowed herself to relax marginally, taking a small sip of the champagne. It was delicious, crisp, and light, nothing like the cheap sparkling wine she remembered. "If you don't mind my asking," Daniel said, closing his laptop, "what awaits you in Denver?" The question was polite, conversational, yet Zoe hesitated. Sharing her desperate circumstances with a stranger felt both vulnerable and shameful. But he had already witnessed her at her lowest. What dignity remained to protect? "A fresh start, hopefully," she answered, choosing her words carefully. "I lost my job in Oakland, and the cost of living there is impossible on unemployment. A friend offered her couch while I look for work at the animal hospital where she's employed." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "You work with animals?" "I was a veterinary assistant, not a veterinarian. I couldn't afford that much schooling, but I'm certified in animal care and basic medical procedures." Pride crept into her voice despite everything. She was good at her job, had loved it before the clinic downsized and eliminated her position. "Admirable work," Daniel said, his tone suggesting genuine respect rather than condescension. "Animals are often better company than people." Zoe found herself smiling for the first time that day. Much better company. The plane leveled off. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and the first-class service began in earnest. The flight attendant presented them with hot towels, a luxury Zoe had only seen in movies, followed by menus for the short flight. "Would your daughter like anything?" the attendant asked kindly. "We have apple juice or milk." "Milk would be wonderful, thank you," Zoe replied, still adjusting to this treatment. In economy, she would have been lucky to get a half can of soda and a bag of pretzels the size of her thumb. As Emma continued to sleep peacefully, Zoe carefully studied Daniel Harrington from the corner of her eye. His suit was clearly expensive, his watch probably worth more than her yearly salary at the vet clinic. He carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to comfort and command. CEO, she guessed, or some other high-level executive. The kind of person who normally wouldn't give someone like her a second glance. Yet here he was, having paid for her infant fee and upgraded them both to first class. People didn't do things like that without a reason. "Mr. Harrington," she began cautiously, "I appreciate your help more than I can say, but I have to ask. Why? Did you do this? Really?" Daniel took a sip of his champagne before answering, his expression unreadable. "Do you believe in karma, Ms. Parker?" The question caught her off guard. "I'm not sure. Maybe. 6 years ago, I was stranded in a Chicago airport during a blizzard. All flights cancelled, hotels booked solid. I had lost my wallet earlier that day, pickpocketed, I believe, and found myself without ID, cash, or credit cards." Zoe's eyebrows rose in surprise. The polished man beside her didn't seem like someone who would ever find himself in such circumstances. "What did you do?" "I was preparing to spend the night on an uncomfortable bench when an elderly couple noticed my situation. They had a hotel reservation they couldn't use. They'd managed to book a rental car instead, and they gave it to me, paid in full. I tried to get their contact information to repay them, but they refused. "Just help someone else when they need it," the woman told me. He turned to face Zoe fully, his green eyes intent. "So that's what I do. When I see someone who needs help I can easily provide, I remember that couple in Chicago. The simplicity of his explanation was disarming. No ulterior motives, no expectations, just a karmic circle completing itself. That's really beautiful, Zoe said softly, meaning it. Daniel shrugged, seemingly uncomfortable with the sentiment. It's practical, really. The world works better that way. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their meals, a grilled chicken salad for Daniel and a pasta dish for Zoe that smelled heavenly. As they ate, Zoe found herself relaxing further, the constant knot of anxiety in her stomach easing slightly for the first time in weeks. Daniel spoke little during the meal, occasionally glancing at his phone or out the window. There was something restful about his silence, no expectation of small talk or performative gratitude. When Emma stirred and woke, blinking in confusion at her surroundings, he simply signaled a flight attendant for the milk they had set aside. "Here," he said, passing Zoe a napkin when Emma dribbled milk down her chin. The gesture was so normal, so unhesitating, that Zoe felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. When was the last time anyone had helped her with Emma? Jessica, perhaps, before she moved to Denver. Emma's father had vanished before she was even born, unwilling to face the responsibilities of parenthood. "Do you have children, Mr. Harrington?" Zoe asked, curiosity getting the better of her. A shadow passed over his face. "No, it wasn't in the cards for me." Something in his tone discouraged further questions on the topic. Instead, Zoe directed the conversation to safer territory. "What brings you to Denver? Business?" "In a manner of speaking," he replied. "I'm meeting with the board of a company I'm considering acquiring." So she had been right. Some kind of executive or investor. "That sounds important." "It's what I do," he said simply, neither pride nor false modesty coloring his tone. "And yourself? Beyond looking for work at the animal hospital, what are your plans in Denver?" Zoe hesitated. Her plans were more like desperate hopes. Find a job quickly, save enough for a security deposit on the cheapest apartment she could find. Maybe enroll Emma in a subsidized daycare program if one existed. Not the kind of aspirations that impress someone like Daniel Harrington. "I'm taking it one step at a time," she finally said. "First job, then stable housing. Eventually I'd like to go back to school, finish my veterinary technician certification. It would mean better pay, more stability for Emma." Daniel nodded thoughtfully, pragmatic and admirable. "Admirable feels like a stretch when you're sleeping on a friend's couch," Zoe said with a self-deprecating smile. "Courage isn't about circumstances, Miss Parker. It's about continuing forward despite them." And before Zoe could respond to this unexpected philosophy, the captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing their initial descent into Denver. The flight, like this strange interlude in her life, was coming to an end. As the plane began its descent, Emma grew fussy again, the pressure change bothering her ears. Zoe offered her a pacifier, which helped somewhat, but the baby's whimpers threatened to escalate. "May I?" Daniel asked, reaching into his briefcase to withdraw a small plush toy, a blue elephant that looked new but not store-bought. "My assistant's daughter left this in my office last week. I've been meaning to return it, but perhaps it might distract your little one for now." Zoe accepted the toy with surprise and gratitude. "Are you sure? Won't her daughter miss it?" "She has a collection," Daniel assured her. "One missing elephant won't be noticed." The toy worked its magic, capturing Emma's attention and soothing her through the landing. As the plane touched down in Denver, Zoe felt a strange mixture of relief and regret. Relief that they had made it, that Jessica would be waiting, that this first hurdle had been cleared. Regret that this unexpected kindness, this brief glimpse into another world, was ending. As passengers began gathering their belongings, Daniel closed his laptop and turned to her. "Ms. Parker, may I make a suggestion?" "Of course," Zoe replied, curious. "Take my card," he said, extracting a business card from his wallet. "If your friend's connection at the animal hospital doesn't work out, call this number. I know several veterinary practices in the Denver area through my charitable foundation. I might be able to make an introduction." Zoe accepted the card, reading the embossed text, "Daniel Harrington, CEO, Harrington Global Investments." Below that, a phone number and email address. "That's very kind," she said carefully, "but I wouldn't want to impose further." "It's not an imposition. It's networking, something people do for each other all the time in business." His tone was matter-of-fact, removing any sense of charity from the offer. "Whether you use it or not is entirely up to you." As they exited the plane, the contrast between first class and reality struck Zoe anew. Back in the terminal, she was just another struggling single mother, invisible to the business travelers rushing past with their roller bags and Bluetooth earpieces. "Well, Ms. Parker, it was a pleasure meeting you and Emma," Daniel said formally as they reached the main concourse. "I wish you both the best of luck in Denver." "Thank you for everything," Zoe replied, meaning it more deeply than the simple words could convey. "You've restored my faith in humanity a bit today." A slight smile crossed his face. "Good. The world needs more faith, not less." With a final nod, he turned and walked away, soon lost in the crowd of travelers. Zoe stood watching his retreating figure until Emma squirmed in her arms, bringing her attention back to immediate concerns. "Right, baby girl," she murmured. "Let's go find Jessica." She headed toward the exit, Daniel's business card tucked securely in her pocket, a talisman of possibility she wasn't ready to examine too closely. Whatever his reasons for helping them, the fact remained that he had changed the course of their day, perhaps more. As she stepped outside into the crisp Denver air, Zoe couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just occurred, something beyond a simple act of kindness from a stranger. A turning point, perhaps, though in what direction remained to be seen. What she didn't know, as she scanned the pickup area for Jessica's battered Honda, was that Daniel Harrington had his own reasons for being on that particular flight, reasons that would soon intertwine their lives in ways neither could have anticipated. The business card in her pocket was more than a gesture of goodwill. It was the first thread in a tapestry of connection that had been years in the making. But for now, Zoe held her daughter close, breathing in the unfamiliar air of a new city, focusing only on the next step forward. Denver spread before her, a landscape of unknown possibilities. Whatever came next, they had made it this far. And sometimes that was enough. Jessica Chen's battered Honda Civic idled at the passenger pickup area, its muffler emitting a worrying rattle that hadn't been there when Zoe last saw her friend. Through the windshield, Zoe could see Jessica anxiously, scanning the crowd, her long black hair pulled into a messy bun, dark circles beneath her eyes betraying her own exhaustion. When their gazes finally connected, Jessica's face lit up with genuine warmth, and for the first time that day, Zoe felt like she might actually be doing the right thing. "You made it!" Jessica exclaimed, jumping out of the car to envelope Zoe and Emma in a tight hug. The familiar scent of Jessica's vanilla perfume, the same brand she'd used since college, brought a lump to Zoe's throat. "And look at this little peanut. She's gotten so big." Emma, usually shy around strangers, reached out curiously toward Jessica's dangling silver earrings, making both women laugh. "She remembers her Auntie Jess," Jessica declared, helping Zoe load her meager belongings into the trunk. "Or at least she remembers shiny objects. Either way, I'll take it as a win." As they settled into the car, Jessica shooting concerned glances at Zoe's pale face, the reality of Zoe's situation seemed to crystallize in the cramped confines of the Honda. She was homeless, jobless, with a baby depending on her and less than $200 to her name. The brief luxury of the first-class cabin already felt like a dream. Daniel Harrington's kindness a mirage that evaporated in the harsh light of her circumstances. "So," Jessica began carefully as she navigated the airport traffic, "how are you really doing? Your texts were pretty vague." Zoe swallowed hard, fighting the urge to minimize her situation. Jessica deserved honesty after offering her home as sanctuary. "I'm surviving," she admitted, adjusting Emma on her lap. "The clinic closed my position with barely 2 weeks' notice. I tried to find something else in the Bay Area, but without full certification, the competition is fierce. Then my landlord raised the rent by 30% and her voice cracked. "I just couldn't make it work anymore." Jessica reached over to squeeze her hand. "Hey, that's why I'm here. That's why you're here. We'll figure it out together, okay? The animal hospital where I work is growing like crazy. They're always short-handed. And Denver's expensive, but nothing like Oakland. There's still affordable places if you know where to look." The reassurance was balm to Zoe's raw nerves, though she noticed Jessica didn't mention how long Zoe could stay on her couch. The unspoken timeline hung between them, a grace period measured in weeks, not months. "Something kind of amazing happened at the airport," Zoe said, changing the subject as they merged onto the highway. She told Jessica about the gate agent, the infant fee she couldn't afford, the humiliating near ejection from the airport, and then about Daniel Harrington's unexpected intervention. Wait, Jessica interrupted, her eyes wide. "Daniel Harrington, as in Harrington Global Investments? That Daniel Harrington?" Zoe blinked in surprise. "I guess. His card said he was the CEO of Harrington Global something, you know. Him?" "Know him. Zoe, he's like legendary in Denver. His company has transformed the entire downtown area. They say he's worth billions, but he's super private, barely any social media presence, hardly ever gives interviews. And he just randomly helped you at the airport." "It wasn't random to him," Zoe said softly, remembering his story about the elderly couple in Chicago. "He believes in paying kindness forward." Jessica's expression remained skeptical. "Well, billionaire or not, that was pretty decent of him. Did he say anything else? Ask for your number or anything?" "What? No!" Zoe felt her cheeks flush. "It wasn't like that at all. He gave me his card, said he might be able to connect me with some veterinary practices. If your lead doesn't work out, that's it." Jessica's tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "Well, keep that card safe. A connection like that could be life-changing in this town." As they drove deeper into Denver, Zoe gazed out at the unfamiliar cityscape, the dramatic backdrop of mountains in the distance, the mix of historic brick buildings and gleaming modern towers downtown. Emma had fallen asleep again, her soft weight comforting against Zoe's chest. Whatever uncertainties lay ahead, they had made it this far. They were safe, at least for tonight. Jessica's apartment was located in a converted warehouse on the outskirts of the trendy Rhino district, the kind of neighborhood that was midway through gentrification, where artisanal coffee shops sat alongside liquor stores with barred windows. The building's industrial exterior gave way to surprisingly warm common areas with exposed brick and reclaimed wood. "Home sweet home," Jessica announced as she unlocked her door on the 3rd floor. "It's not much, but the rent is reasonable, and they allow pets. Which reminds me..." She swung the door open to reveal a sleek black cat perched regally on the back of a worn sofa. "Say hello to Professor Whiskers." The apartment was small, but thoughtfully arranged, a combined living room and kitchen with a single bedroom visible through an open door. The promised couch was dressed with sheets and a pillow, a folded towel and washcloth stacked neatly at one end. "You've been cleaning," Zoe observed with a smile, remembering Jessica's typically chaotic living space from their college days. "Had to make it presentable for my VIP guests," Jessica replied with a wink. "Speaking of which, I scrounged up a portable crib from my neighbor down the hall. Her kid just moved to a big boy bed, so the timing was perfect." The thoughtfulness of the gesture, the effort Jessica had made to prepare for them, brought fresh tears to Zoe's eyes. "Hey, none of that," Jessica said firmly, noticing Zoe's emotion. "You do the same for me. That's what friends are for, right?" As Jessica showed them around the apartment, pointing out the bathroom schedule, "I shower at night, so mornings are all yours. And the quirks of the ancient microwave, you have to press the buttons really hard." Zoe felt a complex mixture of gratitude and shame. She had always prided herself on her independence, on making her own way. Being dependent on Jessica's charity, however freely given, scraped against something fundamental in her self-image. "I promise this is temporary," Zoe said as they settled. At the small kitchen table, Emma finally awake and contentedly exploring a set of plastic measuring cups Jessica had offered as impromptu toys. "I'll find work as quickly as possible, get my own place." "Zoe," Jessica interrupted gently, "take a breath. You literally just arrived. Nobody's pushing you out the door." "I know, Zoe exhaled slowly. "I need to contribute. I can't just take and take. You can help with groceries once you're working, and maybe cook occasionally, since I'm hopeless in the kitchen. But for now, your job is to get settled and focus on finding work." Jessica leaned forward, her expression turning businesslike. "Speaking of which, I've already talked to Dr. Abernathy at Mountain View Animal Hospital. He said you can come in tomorrow for an informal chat, not an official interview, but a chance to meet the team and see the facility." Zoe's heart leaped. "Already? Jess, that's amazing." "Don't get too excited yet," Jessica cautioned. "They don't have any assistant positions open right now, but they do need help at the front desk. Reception, scheduling, basic admin. It's not what you're trained for, but it would get your foot in the door and the pay is decent, plus benefits after 90 days. A reception job wasn't ideal. Zoe had always preferred working directly with the animals. But it was a start, a lifeline. "I'll take anything at this point," she said honestly, "and working the front desk would give me a chance to learn their systems, prove myself reliable." "Exactly what I told Dr. Abernathy," Jessica said with satisfaction. "The meeting's at 10 tomorrow. I have an early shift, but I can watch Emma until you get back." As they continued planning for the next day, Zoe felt a fragile tendril of hope unfurling within her. Maybe this fresh start was possible after all. Maybe Denver really could become home. Later that night, after Jessica had gone to bed and Emma was sleeping soundly in the borrowed crib, Zoe sat curled on the couch that would be her bed for the foreseeable future. The apartment was quiet, except for the occasional creaks of the old building and the soft rumble of Professor Whiskers purring somewhere in the darkness. Unable to sleep despite her exhaustion, Zoe retrieved Daniel Harrington's business card from her jacket pocket. The heavy stock and embossed lettering spoke of wealth and influence beyond her comprehension. What would someone like him think of her current situation? Sleeping on a friend's couch, borrowing a stranger's crib for her baby, preparing to interview for a job she was overqualified for yet desperately needed. On impulse, she pulled out her phone and searched his name. Jessica was right. Daniel Harrington was something of a legend in Denver business circles. Articles described him as reclusive, brilliant, and philanthropic, noting his company's investments in sustainable urban development and his personal foundation's focus on educational opportunities for underprivileged youth. One photo showed him at a charity gala, immaculate in a tuxedo, his expression serious even as he handed an oversized check to a beaming non-profit director. In another, more candid shot, he stood on a construction site, hard hat in place, speaking with workers. There was something in his stance in that second image, a naturalness, a lack of pretension, that reminded Zoe of his manner on the plane. What had driven someone like him to help someone like her? Simple karma, as he'd claimed, or something else? Zoe slipped the card back into her wallet, deciding that his motivations didn't really matter. What mattered was that his kindness had made this moment possible, this quiet night in a safe place, with Emma sleeping peacefully nearby, and the promise of a job interview in the morning. Whatever happened next, she would make the most of this chance. She owed that much to herself, to Emma, to Jessica's generosity, and yes, to the unexpected intervention of a stranger on a plane. The Mountain View Animal Hospital occupied a renovated bungalow in a mixed residential commercial neighborhood, about 20 minutes from Jessica's apartment. The building's exterior had been painted a cheerful blue, with paw prints stenciled along the walkway leading to the entrance. Through the large front windows, Zoe could see a modern reception area where a young woman in scrubs was checking in a client with a carrier containing what appeared to be a very unhappy cat. Taking a deep breath, Zoe straightened her blouse, borrowed from Jessica like the rest of her interview outfit, and pushed open the door. The familiar sounds and smells of an animal hospital immediately enveloped her. The distant barking of dogs in the kennels, the antiseptic cleanliness mingled with pet shampoo, the quiet beeping of monitoring equipment from somewhere down the hall. Despite her nerves, Zoe felt a wave of comfort. This environment, at least, was one she understood. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked as the cat owner moved away with a clipboard of forms. "I'm Zoe Parker. I have a 10 o'clock meeting." "With Dr. Abernathy?" Recognition flashed across the young woman's face. "Oh, Jessica's friend. I'm Alicia. We've heard so much about you." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "Between us, we're drowning in paperwork and phone calls. If you're half as organized as Jessica claims, Dr. A might hire you on the spot." The warmth of the greeting loosened some of the tension in Zoe's shoulders. "That would be amazing. I'm pretty desperate for a fresh start." "Aren't we all?" Alicia replied with a knowing smile. "Let me grab Dr. A for you." Dr. Abernathy proved to be a tall, lanky man in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and spectacles that kept sliding down his nose. His handshake was firm, his expression appraising but kind, as he led Zoe to a small office cluttered with medical journals and framed photos of dogs, cats, and what appeared to be a particularly photogenic iguana. "Jessica speaks very highly of you," he began, gesturing for her to take a seat. "Says you're excellent with the animals, professional with the clients, and quick to learn new procedures." "That's very kind of her," Zoe replied, fighting the urge to downplay the praise. Jessica had coached her the night before. "Don't do that thing where you minimize your skills. Own your expertise." For the next half hour, Dr. Abernathy asked Zoe about her experience, her training, her approach to difficult cases. Though he had made it clear this was an informal chat rather than a formal interview, Zoe could feel herself being evaluated, not just her technical knowledge, but her character, her fit with the clinic's culture. "So here's where we stand," Dr. Abernathy said finally, leaning back in his chair. "As Jessica probably told you, we don't currently have an opening for a veterinary assistant. What we do need, quite desperately, is someone to handle the front desk 3 days a week, with the possibility of picking up additional shifts as needed." Zoe nodded, trying to mask her disappointment. A part-time position wasn't ideal. She needed full-time hours and income to get back on her feet. "However," he continued, noting her expression, "I also need someone who can help with basic procedures when we're short-handed. Weighing animals, taking temperatures, holding for exams, that sort of thing. Nothing beyond your training, but it would make you more of a hybrid position, reception primarily, assistant as needed." Hope flickered anew. "I'd be very comfortable with that arrangement," Zoe said eagerly. "I can handle the front desk, responsibilities, but my passion is really working with the animals directly." Dr. Abernathy smiled. "I thought you might say that. The pay would be $16 an hour to start, with a review after 90 days. Benefits kick in at that point too, assuming all goes well. How does that sound? $16 an hour. For part-time work wouldn't be enough to afford her own place immediately, but it was a start. Better than she had dared hope for on her first day in Denver. That sounds perfect, Zoe said, meaning it. When would you want me to start? How's Monday? That gives you the weekend to settle in, and Alicia can train you on our systems. As they shook hands to seal the agreement, Zoe felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Step 1 accomplished. Employment secured. Not ideal, not permanent, but a solid foundation upon which to rebuild. The rest of the day passed in a blur of paperwork and planning. Dr. Abernathy introduced her to the other staff members present. 2 veterinarians besides himself, another assistant and a technician. Everyone was welcoming, if busy with their own responsibilities. By the time Zoe left the clinic, her head was spinning with new names, protocols, and possibilities. She decided to walk back to Jessica's apartment rather than taking the bus, partly to save the fare and partly to familiarize herself with the neighborhood. Denver in April was crisp but pleasant, the mountain air invigorating after the perpetual dampness of the Bay Area. As she walked, Zoe found herself noticing details she had missed during the car ride the previous night. A small park where she could take Emma to play, a second-hand children's clothing store that might come in handy. As the baby grew, a coffee shop advertising the best chai in Denver that she promised herself she would try once she received her first paycheck. For the first time in months, Zoe allowed herself to imagine a future beyond immediate survival. Perhaps, if she was careful with money and picked up extra shifts when available, she could save enough for a security deposit on a small apartment. By summer's end, she could look into night classes to complete her technician certification, maybe apply for scholarships or financial aid. And Emma would thrive here, away from the stress and instability that had marked her early months. This train of thought carried Zoe past a gleaming high-rise under construction in what appeared to be a rapidly developing part of downtown. A large sign identified the project as Harrington Plaza, the future of sustainable urban living, with the Harrington Global Investments logo prominently displayed. Zoe stopped, staring up at the towering structure. Was Daniel Harrington in there somewhere, in some glass-walled office overlooking the city? The coincidence of encountering evidence of him so soon after their meeting felt significant somehow, a reminder of the strange twist of fate that had brought her to Denver with her dignity intact. On impulse, Zoe pulled out her phone and composed a text message to the number on his business card. Mr. Harrington, this is Zoe Parker from the flight yesterday. I just wanted to thank you again for your kindness and let you know that I had a successful meeting at an animal hospital today. They've offered me a position starting Monday. Your intervention made this possible, and I'm truly grateful. She hesitated before hitting send, wondering if the message was too personal, too presumptuous. He was a busy executive. Why would he care about her job prospects? But something told her he would want to know that his act of kindness had borne fruit, that the karmic circle he believed in was continuing. Taking a deep breath, she pressed send, then continued her walk back to Jessica's apartment, her step lighter than it had been in months. When she arrived, she found Jessica on the floor with Emma, helping the baby stack colorful rings on a toy Jessica must have produced from some hidden reserve of childhood memorabilia. The sight of her friend, someone who had known her before, motherhood, before struggle had worn her down, playing with her daughter struck Zoe as precious beyond measure. "How did it go?" Jessica asked, looking up with eager eyes. "I got the job," Zoe announced, unable to keep the pride from her voice. "Part-time front desk, but with some assistant duties when they need extra hands. $16 an hour, benefits after 90 days. Jessica let out a whoop of delight, startling Emma into dropping her toy. "I knew it! Dr. A would be an idiot not to snap you up. This calls for celebration. I'm ordering pizza and you can't stop me." As Jessica reached for her phone to place the order, Zoe's own phone vibrated with an incoming message. Her heart skipped when she saw the sender, D. Harrington. "Congratulations, Ms. Parker. I'm pleased to hear of your success. Mountain View is an excellent facility with a strong reputation. Should you need anything further as you settle into Denver, please don't hesitate to reach out. D.H." The formal tone made Zoe smile. She could almost hear his measured voice delivering the words. But beneath the formality lay genuine well-wishing, a continued thread of connection that surprised her. "Earth to Zoe," Jessica's voice broke through her thoughts. "Pepperoni, okay? You're looking at your phone like it just proposed marriage." Zoe laughed, tucking the device away. "Pepperoni's perfect, and it was just a confirmation about the job." She didn't mention Daniel's message, though she wasn't entirely sure why. Perhaps because Jessica would read too much into it, would construct romantic scenarios where none existed. Or perhaps because the connection, whatever it was, felt private somehow, a strange, tenuous thread between two people from vastly different worlds who had briefly, unexpectedly, occupied the same space. That night, after the pizza had been devoured and Jessica had gone out to meet friends, "You sure you don't want to come? My friend Amy could watch Emma." Zoe sat at the small kitchen table with her laptop, another loan from Jessica, and began mapping out her finances with ruthless pragmatism. $16 an hour for 24 hours a week came to $1,136 before taxes each month. After taxes, health insurance, and the small amount she insisted on contributing to Jessica's household expenses, she would have barely enough for diapers, baby supplies, and the beginnings of a savings fund for her own place. It would be tight, painfully tight, but doable with careful planning. As she created spreadsheets and budget categories, Emma sleeping peacefully in her borrowed crib, Zoe felt a strange sense of déjà vu. Hadn't she done this exact exercise in Oakland, trying to make impossible numbers work through sheer force of will? The difference was that in Denver, the numbers weren't quite as impossible. The breathing room was slight, but it existed. Zoe closed the laptop, rubbing her tired eyes. One day at a time, she reminded herself. Today, she had secured employment. Tomorrow, she would look into childcare options for the days she would be working. The day after that, something else. Step by step, she would rebuild their lives in this unfamiliar city. As she prepared for bed, her phone buzzed again. Another message from the same number. "One more thing, Ms. Parker. My foundation sponsors a childcare program for working parents at several locations throughout Denver. There's a facility 2 blocks from Mountain View Animal Hospital with openings. I've taken the liberty of adding your name to their list. Ask for Maria Torres when you visit. The program is subsidized, so the cost is minimal. No obligation, of course. D.H." Zoe stared at the message, a complex mix of emotions washing over her. Gratitude, certainly, for such a thoughtful and practical offer, wariness about accepting more help from a virtual stranger, and something else, a niggling sense that Daniel Harrington's continued assistance might come with strings she couldn't yet see. Yet even as this thought formed, she dismissed it. Nothing in their brief acquaintance suggested ulterior motives. If anything, he seemed genuinely committed to his philosophy of paying kindness forward. Childcare had been her most pressing concern after securing employment. The cost in Oakland had been prohibitive. In Denver, she had expected it to consume much of her limited income. A subsidized program within walking distance of her workplace seemed too perfect to be real. A convenient solution dropped into her lap by a benefactor she barely knew. Zoe typed and deleted several responses before settling on, Thank you for the information. I'll definitely look into it. Your kindness continues to be overwhelming." His reply came almost immediately. "Not kindness, investment in your success, Ms. Parker. Sometimes people just need a fair chance. Sleep well. DH, investment." The word lingered in Zoe's mind as she finally settled onto the couch, pulling Jessica's spare blanket around her shoulders. What did Daniel Harrington see in her that warranted investment? And why did she find herself both grateful for and unsettled by his continued interest in her welfare? Questions without immediate answers. For now, she would focus on the tangible blessings: a job, a temporary home, a friend's support, and the possibility of affordable childcare for Emma. The rest, including the enigmatic CEO who had inexplicably inserted himself into their story, could wait for tomorrow. What Zoe couldn't know, as she drifted towards sleep, was that Daniel Harrington sat in his penthouse across town, staring at a photograph on his desk that would explain everything about his interest in the young woman and her child. A photograph that connected their pasts in ways neither had yet recognized, and that would soon transform their futures irrevocably. The Sunshine Beginnings Childcare Center occupied the first floor of a cheerful yellow building just 2 blocks from Mountain View Animal Hospital, exactly as Daniel Harrington had described. From the outside, it looked like any other quality daycare. Bright murals decorating the windows, a small fenced playground visible around the side, parents coming and going with children in tow. Nothing about its appearance suggested it was part of a charitable foundation, or that it offered subsidized rates that could make the difference between stability and financial disaster for a single mother. Zoe shifted Emma to her other hip as she hesitated outside the entrance. It was Friday morning, 3 days after her arrival in Denver, and her first day of work at Mountain View was scheduled for Monday. Finding affordable childcare had been at the top of her priority list, but she hadn't expected to be standing here so soon, courtesy of a billionaire's text message. "Well, Emma Bean," she murmured, pressing a kiss to her daughter's soft curls, "shall we see if Mr. Harrington's recommendation is as good as his taste in airplanes?" Emma responded by reaching for the colorful butterfly decal on the center's glass door, her tiny fingers splayed with determination. Taking this as approval, Zoe pushed open the door and stepped inside. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior had suggested. The reception area flowed into a large, open play space divided into age-appropriate sections. Everything looked clean, modern, and thoughtfully designed. Natural wood toys, reading corners with miniature armchairs, sensory stations with water tables and sand trays. Through an archway, Zoe glimpsed a kitchen area where a staff member, in a bright apron, was preparing what appeared to be morning snacks. A woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair, looked up from the reception desk, her smile warm and immediate. "Good morning. Welcome to Sunshine Beginnings. How can I help you?" "I'm looking for Maria Torres," Zoe said, suddenly feeling out of place in her borrowed clothes with her second-hand diaper bag. "My name is Zoe Parker. I was told to ask for her specifically." The woman's smile widened. "You found her. I'm Maria." Her gaze shifted to Emma, who was observing the new environment with solemn curiosity. "And who is this beautiful little one?" "This is Emma. She's 9 months old." Recognition flashed across Maria's face. "Ah, Ms. Parker, yes, we've been expecting you. Mr. Harrington's office called yesterday." She gestured toward a small seating area. "Please, have a seat. I'd love to tell you about our program and see if we might be a good fit for Emma." As they settled into comfortable chairs, Emma immediately reaching for the basket of toys thoughtfully placed within reach, Maria explained the center's philosophy, schedule, and staff qualifications. Everything she described sounded like a dream. Low staff-to-child ratios, organic meals prepared on site, outdoor time regardless of weather, bundled up in winter, of course, and caregivers with degrees in early childhood education. "This all sounds amazing," Zoe said cautiously, "but I have to ask about the cost. I'm just starting a new job, and my budget is extremely tight." Maria nodded, her expression understanding rather than judgmental. "The Harrington Foundation subsidizes all childcare costs for parents who qualify. The standard rate for our infant program is $375 per week, but the foundation covers up to 80% of that cost based on income level." Zoe did the quick math. Even with the subsidy, she would still be looking at around $300 a month. Significant, but manageable, especially compared to the $1-800 she had been quoted in Oakland. "How do I apply for the subsidy?" she asked, already mentally reworking her budget spreadsheet. "I'm sure there's paperwork, income verification." "Actually," Maria said, her voice lowering slightly, "I received special instructions regarding your application. The foundation has already approved the maximum subsidy level for Emma, effective immediately should you choose to enroll her." Zoe blinked in surprise. That's not standard procedure, is it?" Maria's smile turned slightly enigmatic. "Mr. Harrington takes a personal interest in certain foundation initiatives. The childcare program is one of them." She handed Zoe a folder of enrollment forms. "We have an opening in our infant room starting Monday, if that timing works for you. Emma would be with our youngest group, ages 6 to 12 months. Monday, the same day she started at Mountain View. The timing couldn't have been more perfect, or more suspicious in its perfection. What was Daniel Harrington's game? Why was he smoothing her path in Denver with such calculated precision? Yet even as these questions circled in her mind, Zoe knew she couldn't afford to look this gift horse in the mouth. Affordable, quality childcare within walking distance of her new job was a blessing, regardless of the mysterious circumstances surrounding it. "Monday would be perfect," she said finally. "I start my new position at Mountain View Animal Hospital that day." "Wonderful." Maria clapped her hands together. "Let's get the paperwork started, and then I'll show you and Emma around the facility. You'll want to see where she'll be spending her days." As they toured the center, Emma growing increasingly animated at the sights and sounds of children playing, Zoe found herself genuinely impressed. Every detail had been considered, from the non-toxic cleaning products to the security system that required fingerprint identification for all pickups and drop-offs. The infant room was especially lovely, peaceful without being sterile, stimulating without being overwhelming, staffed by two gentle-voiced women who immediately engaged with Emma. By the time they completed the enrollment forms and said goodbye, Zoe felt a curious mixture of gratitude and unease. She had solved one of her most pressing problems with unexpected ease, but the solution had come through channels she didn't fully understand or trust. Outside, the spring sunshine warmed her face as she walked slowly back toward Jessica's apartment, Emma babbling happily in her stroller. Another loan, this one from Maria, who had insisted Zoe borrow it until you can get your own. The generosity of strangers continued to surprise her, whether it came in the form of a billionaire's intervention or a childcare director's practical kindness. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She expected another text from Jessica checking in, but instead saw Daniel Harrington's number on the screen. "Did you find the childcare center satisfactory, Ms. Parker?" DH. The timing was uncanny, almost as if he'd been watching her. Zoe glanced around instinctively, though she knew the idea was absurd. Daniel Harrington had better things to do than track her movements through Denver. She debated how to respond. The formal Ms. Parker in his messages maintained a professional distance, yet the content suggested a more personal interest in her welfare. Should she match his formality? Challenge his involvement? Simply express gratitude? Finally, she typed, "The center is amazing. Emma has a spot starting Monday. But I have to ask, why are you doing all this? The flight help I understood, but this ongoing assistance feels purposeful." His response came more slowly this time, as if he were carefully considering his words. "I believe in eliminating unnecessary obstacles for people with potential. You've overcome significant challenges to create opportunities for yourself and your daughter. My foundation exists to support exactly this kind of determination. There's no hidden agenda, Ms. Parker." D.H. The explanation was reasonable, even admirable, yet Zoe couldn't shake the feeling that something remained unsaid. Still, what could she do but accept the help and focus on making the most of these unexpected opportunities? "Thank you," she replied simply. "Emma and I are grateful." Back at Jessica's apartment, Zoe found her friend home for lunch break, munching on a sandwich at the kitchen counter. "How'd it go at the childcare place?" Jessica asked, offering half her sandwich to Zoe, who accepted it gratefully. "Surprisingly well," Zoe admitted, settling Emma in the borrowed high chair with some cut-up banana. "It's incredible. Organic. Food, amazing teachers, beautiful facilities. And the Harrington Foundation is covering most of the cost." Jessica's eyebrows shot up. "The Harrington Foundation? As in your airplane savior Harrington?" "The very same," Zoe confirmed, taking a bite of the sandwich. "He texted me about it yesterday, said his foundation sponsors affordable childcare throughout Denver." "Okay, this is officially weird," Jessica declared, putting down her sandwich. "First, he rescues you at the airport. Then he connects you with subsidized childcare that normally has a waiting list a mile long. What's next? Is he going to buy you a house?" "Don't be ridiculous," Zoe protested, though the thought had fleetingly crossed her mind. "He's just, I don't know, paying it forward, like he said on the plane. He has the resources to help, so he does." Jessica hummed skeptically. "And it's pure coincidence that the recipient of all this generosity is a beautiful, capable young woman with an adorable baby." Zoe felt her cheeks warm. "It's not like that. He's at least 20 years older than me, for one thing. And he's been nothing but professional and respectful in all our interactions." "If you say so," Jessica conceded, though her expression remained doubtful. "Just be careful, okay? Nobody gives something for nothing in this world, especially not billionaire CEOs." The warning lingered in Zoe's mind as she prepared for her first day at Mountain View on Monday. What if Jessica was right? What if Daniel Harrington's assistance came with expectations she wasn't prepared to meet? Yet nothing in their brief interactions had suggested romantic or inappropriate interest. If anything, he had maintained a careful distance while still providing practical support. Perhaps he truly was motivated by altruism or by the karma philosophy he had described on the plane. Monday morning arrived with a flurry of activity, Zoe's first-day nerves compounded by Emma's first day at daycare. Jessica had already left for her early shift, leaving encouraging sticky notes on the bathroom mirror. "You've got this." And "Denver's not ready for Team Parker." The walk to Sunshine Beginnings was a blur of last-minute worries. Had Zoe packed enough diapers? Would Emma cry when she left? Would the other children be kind? Would the staff understand Emma's signals, her preferences, the specific way she liked to be held when she was tired? Maria greeted them at the door, her calm presence immediately soothing Zoe's anxiety. "Good morning, you two. Emma, we have a special cubby all ready for you with your name on it. Would you like to see?" To Zoe's surprise, Emma went willingly to Maria, fascinated by the colorful name tag on the small storage space designated as hers. The transition was smoother than Zoe had dared hope, though tears still pricked her eyes as she kissed her daughter goodbye. "She'll be fine," Maria assured her, noting Zoe's emotion. "First days are always harder on the parents than the children. You can call to check on her any time, and we'll send you updates throughout the day." Stepping back out into the sunshine, Zoe felt simultaneously lighter and heavier, relieved of Emma's physical weight, but burdened by the emotional weight of their first significant separation. She had exactly 15 minutes to process these feelings before arriving at Mountain View for her first day. The animal hospital was already bustling when she arrived. Alicia greeted her with a harried smile from behind the reception desk, where a line of pet owners had formed. "Thank God you're here," she said by way of welcome. "Monday mornings are always chaos, ready to jump in." The next 8 hours passed in a whirlwind of training and hands-on learning. Zoe shadowed Alicia at the front desk, learning the scheduling, software, filing system, and phone protocols. During a brief lull, Dr. Abernathy pulled her into an exam room to assist with a reluctant bulldog who needed vaccinations. "Hold him just like that," Dr. Abernathy instructed, as Zoe confidently positioned the stocky dog, speaking soothingly into his floppy ear. "You've clearly done this before." "Many times," Zoe confirmed, maintaining her gentle but firm grip as the veterinarian administered the shots. "Bulldogs can be dramatic, but they're actually big softies if you know how to handle them." The dog's owner, a tattooed man with a surprisingly gentle manner, watched approvingly. "He usually hates the vet, but he seems to like you." "Animals can sense when someone respects them," Zoe replied, giving the bulldog a final scratch behind the ears before releasing him. The simple interaction, connecting with an animal, using her skills, earning a client's appreciation, filled her with renewed purpose. This was why she had chosen this field, why she had pursued certification despite the challenges. Working with animals made her feel competent, useful, and genuinely happy in a way few other things did. Back at the front desk, Alicia nudged her, playfully. "Dr. A was impressed, said you handled Brutus better than most of the techs. Keep that up, and you might find yourself doing more assistant work than reception." The comment buoyed Zoe's spirits further. If she could prove her value with the animals, perhaps the hybrid position Dr. Abernathy had mentioned would tilt more toward her true passion. Throughout the day, Zoe received 3 updates from Sunshine Beginnings: a photo of Emma exploring, the sensory table, a message that she had eaten well at lunch, and an assurance that she was napping peacefully after an active morning. Each notification released a small knot of tension in Zoe's chest. Her daughter was safe, content, and in good hands. By the time she clocked out at 5, Zoe was exhausted but exhilarated. Her first day had gone as well as she could have hoped, with Dr. Abernathy pausing to tell her she was a quick study, and Alicia declaring her a reception desk natural. Walking the short distance to Sunshine Beginnings, Zoe allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. Perhaps this fresh start really would work out. Perhaps Denver really would offer the opportunities Oakland had withheld. Emma's face lit up when she spotted Zoe entering the infant room, her little arms reaching up demandingly. The staff reported a successful first day. Emma had played well, napped on schedule, and even made a friend in another 9-month-old named Oliver. "She's a delightful baby," her primary caregiver Anna told Zoe. "So curious and social. We'd love to see her full-time if that ever becomes an option for you." The hint was subtle but clear. Emma would benefit from more than the 3 days Zoe could currently afford, even with the subsidy. Perhaps someday, Zoe thought as she secured Emma in the borrowed stroller, if the animal hospital offered more hours or if she could find supplementary work on her days off. Lost in these calculations, Zoe almost missed the sleek black car. Idling at the curb outside the childcare center, she might have walked right past if the passenger window hadn't lowered as she approached, revealing Daniel Harrington's now familiar face. "Ms. Parker," he greeted her with a slight nod. "I hope I'm not intruding, but I was in the neighborhood and thought I might inquire how your first day went at both establishments." Zoe halted, surprise rendering her momentarily speechless. The coincidence was too perfect to be believed. You just happened to be here at exactly this time, on my first day of work. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Not exactly. Maria mentioned you would be picking Emma up at 5. I had a meeting nearby and timed my departure accordingly. The honesty was refreshing, if slightly unsettling. Well, since you've gone to the trouble of arranging this coincidental meeting, both days went surprisingly well. Emma seems to love sunshine beginnings, and Mountain View is exactly the kind of practice I hope to join. I'm pleased to hear it. He gestured to the empty seat beside him. May I offer you a ride back to your friend's apartment? It's going to rain soon. According to my weather app. Zoe glanced up at the clear blue sky, then back at Daniel skeptically. Rain? Really? As if on cue, her phone chimed with a weather alert. Sudden thunderstorm warning for Denver metro area. Expect heavy rain within the hour. Daniel raised an eyebrow, his expression suggesting amused vindication rather than smugness. Denver weather is notoriously unpredictable, one of the first things locals warn newcomers about. Zoe hesitated, weighing her options. The apartment was a 15-minute walk, manageable under normal circumstances, but potentially miserable in a downpour with a baby in tow. Yet accepting a ride from Daniel would further entangle them in whatever undefined relationship was developing. The first fat raindrop splatting on the sidewalk made the decision for her. Thank you, that would be very helpful. Daniel's driver emerged to help her collapse the stroller and secure it in the trunk, then opened the rear door for her. Inside, the car was as luxurious as Zoe had expected, buttery leather seats, climate control, and the subtle scent of expensive cologne. I see Emma had a good day, Daniel observed as Zoe settled the baby on her lap. Indeed, Emma was regarding their new surroundings with bright-eyed interest rather than her usual wariness of strangers. When her gaze landed on Daniel, she offered him a gummy smile that made him blink in apparent surprise. She doesn't usually warm up to new people so quickly, Zoe admitted, adjusting Emma's tiny cardigan. She must sense that you're responsible for her fantastic day of play and organic snacks. Children have excellent intuition, Daniel replied, his expression softening as he watched Emma. They recognize genuine intentions before adults do. The comment struck Zoe as oddly revealing. And what are your genuine intentions, Mr. Harrington? Jessica's apartment, by the way, is on Walnut Street, near the old factory building. He nodded to his driver, then turned back to Zoe. My intentions are exactly as I've stated. I believe in removing obstacles for those with potential and determination. You struck me as someone making the best of difficult circumstances, someone who would maximize any advantage offered. That's very flattering, Zoe said carefully, but it doesn't fully explain the level of involvement you've shown. The childcare center, I understand. It's an existing program of your foundation, but arranging to meet me today feels more personal than philanthropic. The rain had begun in earnest now, sheets of water cascading down. The car windows, turning the outside world into an impressionistic blur. Daniel was silent for a moment, watching the downpour. Perhaps I've overstepped, he acknowledged finally. If I've made you uncomfortable, I apologize. That was never my intention. I'm not uncomfortable, Zoe clarified, surprising herself with the truth of this statement. Despite the strangeness of the situation, she didn't feel threatened or manipulated by Daniel's presence. I'm confused and a little suspicious, if I'm being honest. People don't usually take such an interest in strangers without reason. Daniel's gaze returned to Emma, who had begun playing with the buttons on Zoe's blouse. Your daughter reminds me of someone, he said quietly. Someone I lost. Perhaps that's part of it. The admission hung in the air between them unexpectedly, personal after his previous formality. Zoe felt a shift in the atmosphere, a vulnerability that humanized the wealthy CEO in a way his previous kindnesses had not. "I'm sorry," she said simply, unsure how to respond to this revelation. "It was a long time ago," Daniel replied, his tone suggesting the opposite. "In any case, I found that helping others is the most effective antidote to dwelling on one's own losses. My foundation allows me to do that on a larger scale than most." The car slowed to a stop outside Jessica's building, the rain still, pounding on the roof. Before Zoe could reach for the door, the driver appeared with an umbrella, opening it with a flourish and extending his hand to help her out. "Thank you for the ride," Zoe said, turning back to Daniel. "And for everything else. Whatever your reasons, your help has made this transition possible for us." Daniel nodded, his expression returning to its usual composed state. "I'm glad, and I promise to be less intrusive going forward. Perhaps we could meet occasionally to discuss your progress, if that would be more comfortable than these impromptu encounters." The suggestion surprised her, a formal acknowledgement of their strange connection, a structured way to continue whatever this was, without the element of surprise or coincidence. "I'd like that," Zoe found herself saying. "Maybe coffee sometime next week. There's a place near Mountain View that apparently has the best chai in Denver." A genuine smile transformed Daniel's features, erasing years from his face. "The chai spot. Their reputation is well-deserved. Tuesday at noon? I believe that's one of your workdays at Mountain View." Of course he would know her schedule. Zoe might have found this disturbing from anyone else, but from Daniel it seemed merely thorough. Another example of his attention to detail. "Tuesday. Works," she confirmed, accepting the umbrella from the driver and readying Emma for the dash to the building's entrance. "Thank you again for the ride." "My pleasure, Miss Parker. Give my regards to Emma." Or as the car pulled away, Zoe stood for a moment under the umbrella, rain drumming above her head, contemplating the increasingly complicated nature of her new life in Denver. A week ago, she had been facing eviction in Oakland with no prospects and dwindling hope. Now she had a job, childcare, and the puzzling patronage of a billionaire who claimed to see potential in her, or perhaps saw someone else entirely when he looked at her daughter. The thought should have troubled her more than it did. Instead, she found herself curious about the person Emma reminded him of, about the loss he had alluded to so briefly. There were depths to Daniel Harrington that his public persona and business success didn't reveal, complexities that his wealth and power obscured rather than illuminated. Upstairs, she found Jessica home early, preparing a simple dinner of pasta and salad. Her friend's eyebrows rose at the sight of Zoe and Emma, both slightly damp despite the umbrella. "Caught in the cloudburst?" Jessica asked, stirring the pasta. "Sauce. I tried to text you a warning, but you didn't answer." "We had a ride, actually," Zoe replied, setting Emma in her high chair with a teething biscuit. "Daniel Harrington was waiting outside the daycare center when I picked up Emma." Jessica's spoon clattered against the pot. "I'm sorry. What? Mr. Billionaire CEO just happened to be hanging around a daycare center at pickup time?" "He said he had a meeting nearby," Zoe explained, though the explanation sounded weak even to her own ears. "And he knew it was going to rain." "This is getting seriously weird, Zoe," Jessica warned, lowering her voice as if Daniel might somehow be listening. "Normal philanthropists don't track the daily movements of the people they help. They write checks and attend galas and name buildings after themselves." "I know it's unusual," Zoe conceded, helping herself to a glass of water from the pitcher in the refrigerator, "but I don't think it's sinister. He mentioned that Emma reminds him of someone he lost. I think this might be his way of, I don't know, processing that grief, maybe?" Jessica looked unconvinced. "Just be careful, okay? I'm not saying he has bad intentions, but powerful men are used to getting what they want." And right now, for whatever reason, he seems to want to be involved in your life. The warning was reasonable, even necessary, yet Zoe found herself defending Daniel. We're meeting for coffee next Tuesday, in public, at noon. Very proper, very transparent. I'll get a better sense of his motivations then. Good, Jessica said, returning to her sauce. And you'll text me the location and check in afterward, right? Yes, Mom, Zoe teased, bumping her friend's hip with her own. Now tell me about your day while I set the table. As they moved through the familiar rhythms of dinner preparation, Zoe felt a curious sense of standing at a crossroads. Behind her lay the struggles of Oakland, the desperate circumstances that had driven her to Denver. Ahead, multiple paths beckoned, the straightforward route of work, childcare, eventual independence, and the more complex path that included Daniel Harrington's mysterious interest and unexplained generosity. Which path she would ultimately choose remained unclear, but for the first time in longer than she could remember, Zoe felt she had actual choices rather than desperate necessities driving her forward. That alone was worth the uncertainty, worth the risk of trusting in possibilities she couldn't yet fully understand. What she couldn't know, as she laughed with Jessica over dinner and bathed Emma for bed, was that Daniel Harrington had returned to his penthouse across town, where he now stood before an ornate wooden box containing items he hadn't looked at in years. From this box, he withdrew a faded photograph, a young woman with Emma's eyes and smile, her arm around a younger version of himself, both of them radiating happiness that belonged to another lifetime. He placed the photo beside a fresh printout, the results of a DNA test quietly authorized by the Sunshine Beginnings intake process, results that confirmed what he had suspected from the moment he saw Zoe Parker and her daughter at the airport. Results that would change all their lives irrevocably, once revealed. The chai spot occupied a converted Victorian house on a tree-lined street near Mountain View Animal Hospital. Its quirky charm, mismatched armchairs, local artwork on the walls, and a small garden patio visible through French doors made it feel more like a friend's living room than a commercial establishment. The scent of cardamom, cinnamon, and ginger hung in the air, mingling with the rich aroma of freshly ground coffee. Zoe arrived 10 minutes early for her meeting with Daniel, her hair still damp from the quick shower she'd taken during her lunch break. The morning had been hectic, a steady stream of anxious pet owners, 2 emergency cases that required all hands on deck, and a complex scheduling issue that had tested her newly acquired knowledge of Mountain View's systems. Despite the challenges, or perhaps because of them, she felt energized, competent, alive with purpose in a way she hadn't in months. She ordered a chai latte from the friendly barista, then selected a table in the corner where she could watch both the entrance and the garden. The position felt strategic, giving her a small sense of control in this increasingly puzzling relationship with Daniel Harrington. Precisely at noon, the bell above the door chimed, and Daniel entered. Even in this bohemian setting, he stood, out, his tailored charcoal suit and commanding presence marking him as someone from another world. Yet as he removed his sunglasses and scanned the room, Zoe noticed a slight hesitation in his movements, an uncertainty that humanized him. When his gaze found her, his expression warmed with what appeared to be genuine pleasure. He moved through the cafe with easy confidence, stopping briefly at the counter to order before joining her. "Ms. Parker," he greeted her, extending his. "And thank you for suggesting this place. It's been on my list to try, but I rarely make it to this part of town these days." Zoe shook his hand, noting the firm grip and the unexpected calluses on his palm, not the soft hands of someone who spent all his time behind a desk. "I'm glad you could make it, and please call me Zoe. Ms. Parker makes me feel like I'm being called to the principal's office." A smile touched the corners of his mouth. "Zoe, then, and I'm Daniel, at least in settings like this." The barista delivered his drink, A simple black coffee, Zoe noted, and a plate with 2 pastries. The owner insisted I try their cardamom buns, Daniel explained, sliding the plate to the center of the table. Apparently they're somewhat famous locally. Please, help yourself. The gesture was casual, generous without being showy. Sharing food as people had done for millennia to establish trust and connection. Zoe accepted one of the pastries, its warm, spicy scent making her mouth water. "So," Daniel began after they had both taken appreciative bites, "how is your first week progressing at both establishments?" "Surprisingly well," Zoe replied, finding it easier to be open with him than she had anticipated. "Mountain View is busy but organized, and everyone's been welcoming. Dr. Abernathy even pulled me in to assist with a few procedures yesterday when they were short-handed, which I loved. And Emma, she's adjusting to sunshine beginnings. Better than I expected. She's always been adaptable, but I worried about leaving her with strangers." Zoe smiled, remembering Emma's excited babbling that morning when she realized where they were going. "She actually cried when we left today. She was having so much fun with the water table." Daniel nodded, a shadow of something, regret, nostalgia, crossing his features. Children are remarkably resilient, given the right environment and support. "They have to be," Zoe agreed, thinking of all Emma had already weathered in her short life. The instability in Oakland, the cross-country move, the current transitional living situation. The world doesn't stop for their comfort. "But it should," Daniel said softly, surprising her with the conviction in his voice. "That's why my foundation focuses so heavily on children's initiatives. Their potential is limitless if we can just clear the path before them." There was passion beneath his controlled exterior, Zoe realized, genuine belief in the work his foundation did. It made his interest in her and Emma slightly less mysterious, if still puzzling in its specificity. "I've been meaning to ask," she ventured, seizing the opening. "How did you get started with your foundation? Was there a particular moment or event that inspired it?" Daniel's fingers tensed slightly around his coffee cup, a nearly imperceptible reaction that Zoe might have missed if she hadn't been watching him so carefully. "It was established about 5 years ago," he said after a brief pause, "a period of reflection in my life. I had achieved significant business success but found it hollow without purpose beyond profit." It was a polished answer, Zoe thought, truthful, perhaps, but practiced. The kind of response he might give at a fundraising gala or press conference. "And the person Emma reminds you of," she pressed gently, "were they part of that reflection?" His eyes met hers, sharp with surprise at her directness. For a moment, Zoe thought she had overstepped, pushed too far too fast. Then his expression softened. "Yes," he admitted. "My sister, Catherine, she died 6 years ago, along with her husband, in a car accident in Northern California." The genuine grief in his voice made Zoe regret her question. "I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have pried." "It's a reasonable question given the circumstances." Daniel took a deliberate sip of his coffee. "Catherine was my only sibling, younger by 4 years. She had the same curious expression Emma does, that intense focus when observing something new. It's startling to see it again." The revelation explained some of his interest in them, Zoe thought. Emma as a bittersweet reminder of someone beloved and lost. Yet it didn't fully account for the extent of his involvement, the precise targeting of his assistance. "Catherine left behind a daughter," Daniel continued, his voice carefully measured. "My niece would be about 8 now. She was adopted by her paternal grandparents after the accident. They felt a clean break would be best, moved abroad. I haven't been permitted to see her since the funeral." "That's terrible," Zoe said, genuinely appalled. "To lose your sister and then be cut off from her child." Daniel's smile was tight, pained. The Mitchells, my brother-in-law's parents, never approved of Catherine, or of me by extension. They seized the opportunity to remove Sophie from what they considered negative influences. Sophie, Zoe repeated softly. That's a beautiful name. Catherine chose it. Daniel's gaze had drifted to the garden beyond the French doors, where early summer flowers bloomed in cheerful profusion. Perhaps that's really why I approached you at the airport. Not just karma or altruism, but the chance to help someone else's Sophie, since I couldn't help my own. The honesty of this admission touched Zoe deeply. Here was the missing piece, the explanation that made sense of his actions. Not ulterior motives or romantic interest, but displaced care for a niece he had lost. "Thank you for telling me," she said simply. "It helps me understand." Daniel seemed to collect himself, returning from whatever painful memories had momentarily claimed him. "I don't often speak of Catherine or Sophie. It's not something my business associates would understand or care about." "I'm not a business associate," Zoe pointed out with a small smile. "No," he agreed, meeting her gaze directly. "You're not. Which brings me to another matter I wanted to discuss." The shift in his tone alerted Zoe that they were entering new territory. She set down her chai, giving him her full attention. "My foundation is establishing a new program," Daniel explained, "aimed at supporting single parents pursuing higher education or professional certification. Participants receive full tuition assistance, a monthly stipend, and guaranteed childcare through our partner centers like Sunshine Beginnings." Zoe's heart began to race. The program he described sounded exactly like what she needed to complete her veterinary technician certification, the goal she had reluctantly abandoned in Oakland due to financial constraints. "It sounds incredible," she said cautiously. "How many participants will it support?" 10 in the pilot phase, Daniel replied. "We're focusing on healthcare fields initially. Nursing, medical technology, veterinary sciences, areas with strong job prospects and community benefits. The specificity, veterinary sciences, couldn't be coincidental." Zoe set her cup down with deliberate care. "And you're telling me this because you would be an ideal candidate based on your background and goals." His tone remained professional, matter of fact. "The application process is competitive but straightforward. Letters of recommendation, academic history, a personal statement outlining career objectives. Dr. Abernathy has already expressed willingness to support your candidacy should you choose to apply." "You've spoken to Dr. Abernathy about me?" Zoe wasn't sure whether to feel flattered or unsettled by this revelation. "I serve on the board of the Colorado Veterinary Medical Association," Daniel explained. "We've known each other for years. When you mentioned your new position at Mountain View, I simply inquired about your performance." His assessment was glowing, by the way. The connections between the disparate elements of her new life in Denver were multiplying, forming a web that seemed both supportive and potentially constraining. Everything, her job, Emma's childcare, and now this educational opportunity, linked back to Daniel Harrington in some way. "This is a lot to consider," Zoe said finally. "The program sounds perfect, almost too perfect, like it was designed specifically for my situation." Daniel held her gaze steadily. "The foundation designs its programs based on identified needs in the community. Your situation is unfortunately common. Talented individuals unable to advance professionally due to childcare constraints and financial limitations. You would be helping us refine the program for future participants." Put that way, it sounded less like charity and more like collaboration. Zoe is a partner in developing something beneficial for others like her, rather than merely a recipient of Daniel's generosity. The framing was clever, allowing her to maintain her dignity and independence even while accepting significant assistance. When would the program start? She asked, already mentally calculating how she might balance work, school, and parenting. Fall semester, with applications due by the end of July. Daniel withdrew a sleek folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table between them. All the details are here, including contact information for the program director, who is, not me, I should clarify. This would be administered through normal foundation channels. Again, the careful distinction, the professional distance, reassuring her that this wasn't personal favor but institutional support. Yet they both knew the reality was more complicated than that. "I'll think about it," Zoe promised, accepting the folder, "and discuss it with Jessica. She's been my sounding board through all of this." "A good friend is invaluable," Daniel agreed. He glanced at his watch, a subtle, understated timepiece that probably cost more than Zoe would earn in a year. "I should let you get back to work. Thank you for meeting with me, Zoe. It's been refreshing." "Refreshing?" she echoed, curious about his choice of word. "Most of my interactions are transactional. Business deals, foundation politics, networking. This was simply a conversation." He smiled, the expression transforming his serious features. "I've enjoyed it." As they gathered their things and prepared to leave, Zoe felt the same curious mixture of gratitude and wariness that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. Daniel Harrington was either exactly what he appeared to be, a wealthy, somewhat lonely man using his resources to help others while processing his own grief, or he was something else entirely, with motives she couldn't yet discern. "Would you like a ride back to Mountain View?" he offered as they stepped outside into the bright afternoon sunshine. "I'll walk, thanks," Zoe replied, needing the time and space to process their conversation. "It's only a few blocks, and the weather's perfect." Daniel nodded, accepting her decision without pressure. "Until next time, then." As he walked toward a black car waiting at the curb, Zoe called after him, "When will that be? Next time?" He turned, his expression thoughtful. "That depends on you, I think. You have my number." With that enigmatic response, he slipped into the car, which pulled smoothly away from the curb and disappeared around the corner. Zoe stood for a moment on the sidewalk, the folder clutched in her hand, watching the space where the car had been. The meeting had answered some questions while raising others. Daniel's story about his sister and niece explained his interest in Emma, yet something still felt unresolved, as if an important piece of the puzzle remained hidden. As she walked back to Mountain View, Zoe's mind turned over the opportunity Daniel had presented. The program sounded like a dream. Financial support, childcare, the chance to complete her certification and secure a better future for herself and Emma. Yet accepting would further entwine her life with Daniel's, creating obligations she couldn't fully anticipate. The afternoon at Mountain View passed in a blur of appointments and paperwork, with Zoe's thoughts repeatedly returning to the folder tucked in her bag. By the time she picked up Emma from Sunshine Beginnings, the baby covered in colorful, washable paint from an art activity, she had resolved to discuss the opportunity frankly with Jessica that evening. "Let me get this straight," Jessica said, after dinner, once Emma was bathed and settled in her crib. "He's offering you a full ride for your certification, plus a stipend, plus guaranteed childcare, all through this foundation program that just happens to align perfectly with your needs." "That's the gist of it," Zoe confirmed, spreading the program materials across the kitchen table. 10 spots in the pilot phase, focusing on healthcare fields, including veterinary sciences. "And he told you about his dead sister and the niece he's not allowed to see," Jessica added, scanning the glossy brochure with skeptical eyes. "Convenient emotional backstory that explains his interest in you and Emma." Zoe frowned at her friend's characterization. You think he made it up? Why would he? Not made up, necessarily, but carefully selected and presented. Jessica set down the brochure and met Zoe's gaze directly. Look, I'm not saying don't accept this amazing opportunity. I'm just saying be aware that there might be strings attached that aren't visible yet. What kind of strings? Zoe challenged. He's been nothing but respectful and professional. There's been no hint of romantic interest or inappropriate expectations. Not all strings are romantic or sexual, Jessica pointed out. Some are emotional. He's clearly working through something with this fixation on you and Emma. What happens when he resolves, whatever it is? Or when you don't meet his unspoken expectations? The questions were uncomfortable but fair. Zoe had wondered similar things herself, though she was increasingly inclined to trust Daniel's stated motivations. I think he's genuinely trying to help, she said finally. Yes, there's an emotional component because Emma reminds him of his sister. And yes, that makes this complicated. But the program itself is legitimate, administered through proper channels. I'd be crazy not to apply. Jessica's expression softened. I agree, apply. Just go in with eyes wide open, okay? And maybe establish some clearer boundaries about his involvement in your life. Zoe nodded, accepting the wisdom of her friends. Caution even, as she felt a surge of excitement about the possibility ahead. If accepted to the program, she could complete her certification within a year, potentially doubling her earning potential and opening doors to specialized positions that were currently closed to her. I'll start working on the application this weekend, she decided. Will you read my personal statement when it's ready? You've always been better with words than me. Of course, Jessica promised, squeezing her hand. That's what friends are for. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm that felt surprisingly normal, given the extraordinary circumstances that had brought Zoe to Denver. Weekdays were divided between work at Mountain View, where she was gradually taking on more assistant duties alongside her reception responsibilities, and evenings with Emma, exploring their new city one park and library at a time. Weekends were for laundry, meal prep, and increasingly, work on her application for the foundation program. Daniel maintained a respectful distance during this period, though Zoe received occasional text messages checking on their welfare or offering practical information about Denver resources for newcomers. Each message was signed with his initials, DH, maintaining that curious blend of formality and personal interest that characterized their relationship. 3 weeks after their coffee meeting, as Zoe was putting the finishing touches on her personal statement for the program application, her phone chimed with a call from an unfamiliar number. Ms. Parker, this is Maria Torres from Sunshine Beginnings. The childcare director's voice held an unusual tension that immediately put Zoe on alert. There's been an incident with Emma. She's all right, Maria added quickly, but she developed a very high fever quite suddenly and has been vomiting. We think it might be an ear infection. She's been tugging at her right ear. Zoe's heart raced as she glanced at the clock. It was barely 10 a.m. She was scheduled until 5 p.m., and Mountain View was particularly busy that day with 2 doctors out at a conference. I'll be there as soon as I can, she promised, already mentally calculating how quickly she could find coverage for the front desk. Have you given her anything for the fever? We called the nurse line for permission to administer children's acetaminophen, which they approved based on her symptoms and weight. It brought the fever down slightly, but she's still very uncomfortable. Thank you for taking care of her, Zoe said, genuine gratitude cutting through her anxiety. I'm leaving now. Hanging up, Zoe hurried to find Alicia, explaining the situation and apologizing profusely for the inconvenience. To her immense relief, Alicia waved away her concerns. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.